We'll get some insights from retired Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. He joins us now via Zoom. Good morning to you, Justice Carpio.
Good morning, Gretchen. Good morning to our viewers.
Okay, it is the start of the national campaign, and I want to talk about the backdrop of this campaign. We do know that there is a looming impeachment trial. First off, is there anything in the law that says how candidates, particularly senatorial candidates, how they should act during the campaign period? Because we do know that whoever wins this will serve as a senator judge.
Well, it will be good if they will refrain from discussing the issue that's part of the articles of impeachment, so that there will be no question later on that they are already biased. So, since the articles of impeachment have been signed, have been submitted to the Senate, and they can read it, and for just to be cautious about it, they should not be discussing it even in the campaign.
But is there anything in the law that explicitly states that?
There is none, but if they say something that would be a prejudgment, then VP Sara can ask that they inhibit themselves. Of course, it's up to them whether to inhibit or not. But just to avoid that semblance of bias,
I remember. I remember you were talking about.
They should avoid it.
I remember you were talking about this in a previous program where we talked about the possibilities here of when the trial could be conducted, if it was possible to have that during the break. At nasabi po ninyo na the budget could play a role in that. The President could reopen the discussion for the GAA. But the Senate President already said that this could be tackled after the State of the Nation address. If you put it in the context of our criminal and civil courts, parang sinabi niyo pong mag-antay muna ng mga 5 buwan yung mga naghain o nagsampa ng kaso. I mean, is that fair to move it until after the SONA?
Well, the Senate, the President said that if the Senate requests for a special session, he will call a special session. But there's a problem there because the President has no role in the impeachment. The impeachment is solely the exclusive function. It's the Constitution says this House has the exclusive power to initiate the impeachment, and the Senate has the sole power to try and decide the case. So even the President said that he has no role in the impeachment. So it will be problematic if he, on his own, if he calls for a special session just to so the Senate can organize as a impeachment court. But there is a way around that. He can call for a special session to pass immediate or urgent legislation, and that is really the amendment to the GAA, because everybody's complaining why there was no funding, no allocation for PhilHealth, no allocation for the DepEd's computerization, and also the AFP modernization was the fund for the AFP modernization was reduced by 15 billion. So the President can legitimately call for a special session to address these matters. And once Senate is convened, then it's up to the Senate now to take advantage of the time to convene as an impeachment court.
Because Senator Cheese Escudero said that legally an impeachment trial cannot be done. That has to be first convened in a session before an impeachment court can be formed. But I actually took a look at the Constitution at Article 6, Section 15, and it says that the President may call for a special session at any time. Is that correct? That the President does not have to wait for anyone?
Yes, but that is in the context of legislation. But in the context of impeachment, the President has no has no role. He himself said that there is no role for the president because the Constitution says the House shall have the exclusive power to initiate impeachment, and the Senate shall have the sole power to to try and decide all impeachment cases. So there is a question of whether the president can call a special session, since that will be interfering in the impeachment process. So the way to go around that is for him to call a special session to enact immediate or urgent legislation. And while the Congress is convened, there's nothing to prevent them nothing to prevent the Senate from convening as an impeachment court.
Pero hindi po ba dito sa provision na ito, the President may call a special session at any time, wala naman pong nakakabit na sinasabi that this cannot be held for impeachment, that it is only for legislation. It was actually just very generic,
Well,
ano?
the history of that's only for legislation. And besides, in the impeachment, it says the House shall have this exclusive power. And also in the Senate shall have the sole power to try and decide all impeachment. So there is really no role for the president for purposes of impeachment. And so if he calls for a special session for the Senate to organize his impeachment court, is giving himself a role. So just to prevent any questions on that, there's a way to do that. He can just call a special session for urgent legislation, and since Congress is already convened, the Senate can organize as an impeachment court.
Can the special session emanate from a majority of Congress if they do decide? I mean, the Senate President has already given his take on this, that it would be feasible to do that right after the State of the Nation address. But if majority of Congress submits a proposal to have a special session, can that also happen in that manner?
Yes, the president said that if there is a request from the Senate, he will call a special session. But the Senate doesn't want to be called into a special session. So there's a deadlock. So how do you solve that deadlock? We have to find a way to have the Senate convened without any legal infirmities. So that's the best, really, to call for a special session to enact immediate legislation. But since the Senate is already convened, they can organize as an impeachment court.
But having to wait for 5 months for this to get the ball to roll, is there no other faster timeline that is feasible at this point?
My proposal is the only feasible because, one, the Senate doesn't want to be convened as an impeachment court unless there is a special session. And the president said that I have no role in impeachment, so he can call a special session to enact urgent legislation. Now, since the Constitution says that trial shall proceed forthwith, then it's too long, really, for 5 months to wait for that. So to resolve that, the president can call a special session to enact urgent legislation, and while Congress is already convened, they can continue, they can organize as an impeachment court.
Is it true that, according to Senate President Chis Escudero, that they could continue on if it starts with the 19th Congress, it is possible to carry over to the 20th Congress because it is analogous to the situation in other courts where cases do not revert to scratch whenever a judge vacates his or her office?
Yes, I agree with that. If they cannot complete the proceedings in the 19th Congress, they can continue that in the 20th Congress because the Senate, the Supreme Court said that the Senate is a continuing institution. It did not say it's a continuing legislative body. It's a continuing institution. So for purposes of impeachment, it continues. And besides, just like what you said, in the collegiate courts, if there are retirements or resignations or promotions, there are vacancies, the remaining members of the court can continue if they constitute a majority, and they can, and if there are new appointments to the vacant positions, then they can continue if they have now the majority, if they have a quorum.
Bakit po may sinasite naman po yung iba na upon the ending of a specific Congress, all dealings, all hearings, and all dealings will be terminated? What is, I mean, putting those two side by side, the law that you mentioned and this one, ano po yung pagkakaiba nun?
Well, because for the House of Representatives, all their terms expire on June 30. So everything, all pending matters are deemed terminated. They have to be refiled in the new Congress. But in the case of the Senate, there are 12 senators that remain. 12 senators run for re-election or graduate. So that's why the Supreme Court said the Senate is a continuing institution. But in the case of the House, the Supreme Court has said that they are dissolved at the end of the term of the House of members of the House. And everything is terminated. All pending matters are terminated.
So to your analysis, is the timeline proposed by the Senate President fair? Justice?
Yeah, yes, the Senate President's position that the Senate can continue, the impeachment court can continue into the 20th Congress, that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. But waiting for 5 months is rather long. They should find a way to cut that short, and the way to cut that short is for the President to call for a special session to enact immediate or urgent legislation. And so once they are convened into a special session, the Senate can now convene as an impeachment court.
And the last thing that he said was, if the senators ask for a special session, but again, they will decide, we did not decide this. All right.
Yeah, that's the problem. If you leave it to the senators, they'd rather campaign. Now, if you really want to the trial to proceed forthwith, then that's the only way for the president to call a special session.
But then that removes any form of deniability here. All right, maraming salamat.
No,
Go ahead,
he
go
can
ahead.
deny it because he will call a special session to enact legislation, not for Congress, for Senate to convene as an impeachment court. So, but since they are already convened into a Congress, into a special session, the Senate can take that time to convene as an impeachment court. So the call for a special session by the President will not mention the impeachment at all. He will just say, convene to a special session to correct the 2025 budget. So that's the sole purpose. But since Congress is already in session, the Senate can convene as an impeachment court.
If they do want to reopen the budget at all, right? All right, thank you so much.
Because it's very unfair not to give budgetary allocation to PhilHealth or to the DepEd for computerization. We are almost at the bottom already in terms of education in ASEAN and even in Asia. So we are far behind. So we have to address that. That's really important. That's urgent.
All right, thank you so much for weighing in on that with us on what can be done here. We have a retired Supreme Court Associate Justice Antonio Carpio talking to us about the impeachment timelines.